Fala, galerinha, muito boa noite a todos os amigos e amigas aqui presentes nesse domingão super mais que ultra especial. Está começando mais um Domingão com RAFI, hoje, edição do dia 26, nosso 26º dia de julho de 2020, certamente um Domingo com RAFI para ficar marcado para a história. Muito obrigado a todos que estão chegando aí. Vamos chegando. Július já está com a gente aqui. Já estamos com toda a estrutura prontinha para receber o Július e a gente falar sobre o RRG, entre outras coisas. Quero começar, né, dizendo a vocês o quanto eu estou empolgado, né, que aqui o programa de hoje ele é quase que uma realização de algo que você não imagina que poderia acontecer, né? Eu encontrei o Julius pela primeira vez em 2017, num congresso em Nova York, e eu já conhecia a ferramenta dele. Já conhecia a ferramenta dele desde 2014, 2015, por aí, mais ou menos. E já tinha uma noção de como tudo funcionava. Eu tinha sido um amigo meu da Bloomberg, do terminal Bloomberg, me ajudou, treinou um pouco com as informações. Então, eu fiquei muito animado com tudo com o que eu tinha visto. E aí, quando eu estive em Nova York, encontrei com o Július, ele pôde me apresentar um pouco a ferramenta, falar como é que tudo funcionava. E aí, desde então, por que eu estou comentando tudo isso? Porque foi dali, daquele momento, que eu falei, puxa, cara, que legal isso aqui é algo bacana, isso aqui é algo... Tem uma informação boa aqui para a gente passar, para a gente aprender. E aí eu falei, puxa, quem sabe algum dia eu não possa colocar o Julius ou vários outros palestrantes de alto nível que eu assisti em Nova York, lá em 2017, para um dia falar para o público brasileiro. Ou para um dia falar no domingo com o RAFI. Então, o dia de hoje ele é um pouco desse dia, que eu jamais podia imaginar que pudesse acontecer, e da gente trazer alguém que tem uma bagagem de mercado muito moderna, muito para frente, e com uma ferramenta que eu não tenho dúvida, que é uma ferramenta que vai ajudar em muito ao tipo de análise. Então, vocês já estão notando que a tela está um pouco diferente, tradicionalmente, do Domingo com RAFI. A gente está usando o Zoom para poder fazer a transmissão. Tá? E aí eu tenho um recadinho para dar para todos vocês. Né? O primeiro recado é que eu vou apresentar o Julius, ele vai falar aqui com a gente, etc. E aí a tradução vai ser simultânea. Temos duas intérpretes aqui com a gente, a Dani, a Paula, duas mulheres super especiais que se prepararam para o dia de hoje muito bem para poder comunicar de maneira correta, principalmente dos termos. Então, muito legal. Elas certamente vão dar ali o melhor e eu também vou dar o meu melhor, afinal de contas eu vou ter que falar inglês. Tá? Então, a tradução vai ser simultânea. Para aqueles que quiserem ouvir o áudio em original em inglês, tá? Fiquem tranquilos. Assim que acabar o Domingo com a RAFI, eu vou subir um novo vídeo com áudio original. Tá? Isso porque a gente tem algumas limitações de ferramentas, etc., e tudo que vai fluir numa boa. O segundo recado muito importante que eu tenho para falar para vocês é que várias vezes vocês não vão me ver olhando diretamente para a câmera, conversando com vocês, mas eu estou falando com vocês. O problema é que, como eu estou dividindo a minha tela aqui entre olhar para o Julius e conversar com ele, eu não necessariamente vou estar falando com você aqui agora, olhando para a câmera. Então, vocês vão me ver olhando muito para baixo, vocês vão me ver olhando muito para cima aqui. É um pouco diferente do que tradicionalmente vocês estão acostumados todos os domingos, tá? Mas isso eu acho que é normal, é uma questão só da gente se preparar para o que vem por aí, tá? Então, tem um pouco disso, tem a questão da tradução simultânea, eu deixei aqui uns recadinhos para poder falar com vocês.
Eu tenho certeza que vocês vão gostar. O Julius preparou algumas apresentações em slide, ele está aqui, ele já falou comigo, então eu tenho certeza que vocês todos vão aproveitar bastante a ferramenta. Deixa eu colocar aqui uma coisa importante, antes da gente chamar o Julius aqui, e eu estou esperando aqui, espera aí, só um minutinho. Uma das coisas que eu queria não deixar de falar em nenhum momento aqui com você é sobre o índice Bovespa. Tá? Na última sexta-feira, o índice Bovespa fechou com um pregãozinho razoavelmente não tão animador assim, né? Então, se a gente olhar sobre a perspectiva do gráfico semanal, a gente tem aqui algumas coisas que chamam a atenção. Então, eu vou dividir aqui uma tela com vocês. Essa aqui é a minha tela. Quando a gente viu no domingo passado, né, a gente falou que o mercado estava muito animado, afinal, o Ibovespa estava com uma cara muito boa para seguir em frente, romper resistência e mostrar um super fôlego aí na compra, né? E como a gente pode perceber, na última semana largou um candle de indefinição. Tá? Esse candle de indefinição certamente pode ser uma pausa desse último rally dos últimos 3 dias. Tá? A gente rompeu uma resistência importante na retração do 61,8, saldo de volume mostra algumas evidências bacanas, mas a gente pode olhar que o mercado vem perdendo um pouquinho de força, né? Vem perdendo aí um pouquinho de fôlego. Esse é o semanal. O gráfico diário, você vê que tem não tanta coisa assim para falar, porque largamos com um candle de muita indefinição. A gente vai certamente falar com o Julius a respeito da rotação do setor, pontos setoriais, tá? E exatamente dos pontos que são objetivos aqui para cada movimento. A gente vai falar sobre isso. Gustavo, obrigado pelo seu super chat. A gente vai responder essa pergunta, tá? Ela está com prioridade. Aliás, super chat é prioridade, tá? Super chat é prioridade. Então, obrigado. Eu vou responder essa sua pergunta. Na verdade, o próprio Julius vai responder essa pergunta, tá? Mas eu queria compartilhar com vocês os 6 setores, tá? São 6 setores que, na última semana, todos eles, sem exceção, aliás, tem uma exceção que é o setor de materiais básicos, tá? Enfraqueceram, perderam performance, tá? Então, se vocês olharem, né, os 6 setores aqui que eu olho, que eu uso e que falo com vocês diariamente, né, todos os momentos, nós temos aqui o setor, o IFNC, o setor financials, né, o setor financeiro. Repara que largou um candle que parece ser de topo, vai depender, se tivermos uma barra de queda, pode vir para baixo. Setor de consumo também, largou um candle de definição. O imobiliário foi o que mais perdeu força. Utilidade pública e energia elétrica, nem tanto assim. E o materiais básicos se mantém um pouquinho forte por causa de Suzano. Se vocês olharem Suzano, ela andou bem essa semana. Tá? Então, antes da gente começar, eu já queria deixar com vocês aqui um pouco desse meu espírito do que eu estou vendo para o mercado no geral. Tá? O que eu estou achando para o mercado no geral. No mercado, eu acho o seguinte, nós tivemos 3 semanas consecutivas com o mercado de alta. E aí a gente largou um candle de definição, o mercado começou ali a ficar um pouco mais fraco, perdeu o momentum, a gente vai falar sobre isso. Só que, dando um pouco de spoiler, o Ibovespa, no RRG, ele está com uma cara muito boa. E os sinais dos setores, individualmente falando, estão um pouco fracos. Então, eu pretendo debater isso com o Julius, tá? Assim, no sentido de
de mostrar o quanto deve ser, o quanto é relevante, etc. Mas, obviamente, eu quero que vocês primeiro aprendam sobre a ferramenta, como ele vai explicar. Então, era essa um pouco dessa introdução que eu gostaria de fazer com vocês, tá? Mandem as suas perguntas pelo chat, pode mandar à vontade, porque a gente tem um time aqui que vai pegar as suas... Pode escrever em português se quiser, tá? E a nossa equipe vai traduzir isso para inglês e vai me mandar aqui para que eu possa receber e fazer a pergunta para ele, tá bom? Então, assim como o nosso amigo aqui, o Gustavo, né? Ele mandou a pergunta, fiquem à vontade para mandar também, tá bom? Então, vamos tomar uma aguinha aqui. Então, vamos nessa. Deixa eu pegar aqui as minhas colinhas. Muito bem, galera. Então, a partir de agora, eu vou chamar o Julius aqui com vocês. Vamos começar. Uma boa noite. Vamos virar aqui para o inglês, a turminha. Fique preparada aí e vamos fazer o melhor programa possível, tá? Well, here, ladies and gentlemen, and all my good friends, I'm so glad and proud that this is happening. Thanks God, this is happening. For the first time in 13 years, my show, Domingo com Rafi, has an international guest. I'm about to introduce you the man who created the RRG, the Relative Rotation Graph. This unique method for visualizing relative strength within the universe of securities was first launched on Bloomberg Professional Service Terminal in 2011 and also released on stockcharts.com in 2014. After graduating from the Dutch Royal Military Academy, Julius served in the Dutch Air Force in many capacities. He retired from the military as a captain in 1990 to enter the financial industry for a portfolio manager. Julius, thanks again. I don't know if you had a coffee or energy drink yet, because it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning there. Thanks for being up at this time. Brazilians are exciting to hear you. Thanks again, Julius.
Boa noite, Rafi.
Boa noite.
That's as good as it gets for my Portuguese, I'm afraid. Yes, I did have a lot of coffee already. So I should make it for the next 45 minutes to an hour to stay awake.
Great.
And thank you for having me. I'm excited. You have a lot of viewers, so I'm super impressed. And I'm happy to be able to talk to you about RRG, because we met a few times already at conferences in New York. I think 4 years, maybe 5 years?
I think 5 years. Yeah. The first time it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, so we are good friends now already. So yes. I'm happy to be able to join you in your show tonight.
Okay, thanks, Julio. Thanks. So I would like to start with the same question that I asked you in 2017 when we met at the symposium in New York. So how did you create RRG? Explain us what was in your mind when you came up with this tool?
Yeah, that's probably the only question. That's, if we want to talk about that question, that is probably the only thing we can talk about in the next 45 minutes. But I'll try to answer it in a logical way, so to say. And you need to know the background of my job at the time. We're talking somewhere mid-90s, second half of the 90s, and I was working as a sell-side analyst for a bank on a trading floor. And well, you know how that goes. Our clients were institutional clients, And that is a very competitive area. Basically, the business model for an investment bank was and probably still is that the analysts write research, provide research, they send it to the clients, and then the salespeople and the traders, they start calling the clients and they talk about the reports, and when the client liked the report, he would give the order to buy or sell a specific security to the salesman. And that's when the cash register starts to ring. That's when you actually make the money, because the reports were sent out for free, and only when the people traded with you, then you would make money as a bank. But as I said, you know, you're competing with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, you know, all the investment banks, they're all competing for the same business at Fidelity and Wellington and Robeco in Holland and all these big investors. And I was obviously a technical analyst, so I was covering at that time the the Stocks 600 universe. That's a 600 stock universe in Europe, which was divided in 19 sectors. And my job was basically to write reports and talk to these investors on what I saw on various sectors, in various stocks, etc. And the one thing that I figured out pretty rapidly, because, you know, technical analysts traditionally work with a chart and they say this is going up or down. So they look at, you know, in your case, the Ibovespa or some individual stocks, and you talk about the stock, it goes up or it goes down, and you need to buy it or you need to sell it. Problem with institutional investors is that they are less interested in the direction of the market as a whole. Of course, they want to know whether the market's going up or down, but because their portfolios are so big, they cannot, even if they know like 100% sure that the market is going down, there's no way they can sell their whole portfolio. It's just impossible. So what they want to know is which sectors or which stocks are outperforming the market. And that is the game where, you know, very simple, if the S&P goes down 10% and your portfolio goes down only 5%, you are a king because you have outperformed the market by 5%. Although you lost 5% of your clients' money, you're still a hero because you did better than the market. So that was the game that I needed to play. I needed to come up with ideas and views on which parts of the market would do better than the others. Where was the outperformance? So I started using relative strength. And that's not like the RSI that a lot of people use, a lot of technicians use, but it's comparative relative strength. So you compare one stock with another. And I started writing my reports about that. And I ran into a situation where clients would always ask me, you know, what is the best or what is the worst, etc. And they, for some reason, all these guys and girls want to have rankings. They want to have a table. So I came up with a way to rank a universe based on relative strength. And that was basically, that was the first bit of RRG. I had no idea that it would become RRG, but it was the first thing. So I built an indicator that would rank a universe of stocks so that they were all comparable. And I started using that in my reports. I started writing about it and communicating about it. And we're talking 2000, 2001, when the tech bubble basically was, and the NASDAQ went to, I think it was 5,000, and you know, everything was going through the roof. And then at a certain time that these stocks started to roll over, but my indicator was trend following. Like a lot of stuff that we do in technical analysis is trend following. So when that started to roll over and the technology sector started to lose pace with the market and started to underperform, my indicator was still way up there. So in my table, that technology sector was still listed as #1. And I'll never forget, I got an email from an Italian investor basically writing to me, hey, Julius, this time your system didn't work too well. Yeah, okay, he's got a point. Because it was true. Because, you know, we're always late. If we're trend following, we're always late.
Yes,
we're always lagging the market. That's just the fact of life. So I thought I need to have some sort of a warning signal. I need something that tells me that something is going on under the hood. And that resulted in a secondary indicator, which is basically the rate of change of the first one, because my thought process was like, okay, so what will help me in the technical analysis toolkit to come up with an earlier signal? And that's momentum, that's rate of change. That's a leading indicator. Momentum will change before whatever you're looking at changes. So I started playing around with rate of change and with momentum. And that became the JDK RS momentum line. So now I had a table with 2 values that I could use to rank and slice and dice. And I was doing that in a table, in a spreadsheet. But, you know, we're technicians. We like visuals. We like to see what we're doing. So I started plotting those 2 values like as a normal indicator on a chart. And that works well. But with that table, I could, you know, because, you know, the day-to-day business is you start calling your clients and, hey, George, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. I have a few ideas in the chemical sector. And then George says, no, Julius, no. This week is technology week. You know, Goldman Sachs is having this big conference and JP Morgan is visiting us with a couple of tech companies. So what are your best 5 names in technology? Well, of course, because you're tracking 600 stocks in 19 sectors, you know, you can't prepare everything because, you know, you would have a list like that. So I would pick a few that I thought were interesting. Obviously, that wasn't matching his expectations. So then I thought I need to come up with something that will make it immediately clear what is going on. And it coincided with a period where, because I was an analyst, and we had analysts, sales traders, and traders. So the analysts come up with the report and the idea, the sales trader talks to the clients, and the trader executes the order. But analysts were expected more and more to actually phone up clients and talk to them and basically become more commercial. So they had the bank had organized a course for us to basically a commercial course. How do you talk to clients? How do you pitch ideas? And the guy who was conducting the course was Scottish. And so we were sitting in this room and like, he was explaining how you could, you know, basically you needed to set yourself apart from the rest because, you know, like in a retail, it's marketing. It's all marketing. You need to do something different. And this guy had a phrase, and he, in a very, very thick Scottish accent, he would say, "You got to make the facts sizzle." And that line always stayed with me. You got to make the facts sizzle. Basically saying like, you got to make it very special. You got to give him something that, you know, immediately attracts the eyes. But mind you, this is late, well, maybe early 2000s. So, you know, Twitter, Facebook, social media, the whole thing, it wasn't even, either it wasn't there or it was very, very early stage. So, you know, the whole thing that we now have with clickbait and headlines on articles, when you click on the article and you read the article thinking, oh, that has nothing to do with the title, that wasn't really the thing at that time. So we needed to come up with a very special way to set ourselves apart from the competition. So I was playing with these tables, and then at some stage I was literally playing around with Excel. I had that table in Excel, and I was updating that every week. And I was just, you know how it goes. You know, you select a bunch of numbers and you start playing around, and you know, let's see what kind of charts Excel gives me. And all of a sudden, I clicked on a scatter plot, and there comes probably the first version of RRG. It wasn't even close to what it is right now. But it was like, hey, that's very interesting, because you know, we're always used to having charts with price and time and just a bar chart and maybe a few indicators, and that's it. So I was looking at that scatter plot with a few dots on it, and I was like, I really needed to reset myself and say, okay, so what am I actually looking at right now? What is it that I am actually looking at? And I figured it out. It was my measure of relative strength, the RS ratio on the horizontal axis, and that rate of change measure on the vertical axis. And you got the 4 quadrants, and all these dots, because there were dots, were, you know, nicely scattered around. And it was for sectors. So I could see, hey, this sector is over there and it's doing well. And it's like, whoa, that's really cool. And so I worked a little bit more on that, and started to use that in my reports. I basically still had my report where I had 19 charts, and I write my comments, and then at the end I had my table, and I added this scatter plot with those values at the end, and I started doing that. And one of my clients was Fidelity in Boston, and one of the analysts there is Dave Keller. You know Dave Keller. You met him at the CMT, and he's now working. He's now also, just like me, working for stock charts in Redmond. Dave at that time was managing director of research in Fidelity, and he was one of the very first takers of that research. And one day I was on the phone with Dave, and you know, chatting about the markets, talking about sectors, and you know, how does it go, blah blah blah. And then Dave said, you know what, that last page in your report, I print that out every week. So what are you doing? He says, well, when I have a bunch of weeks, and is that a thing in Brazil where, you know, when you were in school, in high school or elementary school, and your classes were boring, where you had a notebook and you would draw a little puppet, a little man on the bottom of your page, and then the next page you would draw the same guy but a little bit further, and you do it on every page, and when you would take all the pages and and then the puppet started to move.
But I remember that. I remember the thing that you showed me like this. You take a book and you open it like this one here. So let me see what. Hang on, just a second. So it's like this. You take a book and say
exactly.
And you print, yes, yeah. And it prints, and you can see all the little dots on each page, but you see exactly. The whole picture. So, yeah, a bunch of picture, you can see a whole movie.
Yeah. So what Dave did, he did that with because my graphs, my scatter plots were static. So Dave did that, and he could see where those dots were moving. Hey, that's very interesting. So I started to actually add the previous. So I went back to, still in my Excel spreadsheet, started to add the previous value. And then we had this, we could see where it was moving from the previous week to this week. And that's how basically how RRGs came to life, and then you started more and more and more and more, and then you could see, like, because then you could actually see, hey, you see actually the rotational move of all of this. So yeah, maybe it's a little bit of a long answer, but that's like, how did they come to life? Well,
yes,
this is sort of the journey that I went through before, you know, the first, let's say the very first version of that was a very first version of RRG.
Right.
Basically.
Great, perfect. So, can you show us the RRG, and can you explain us how does it work and
yeah,
the tool
let me share my screen then, and I have a few slides that I can share with you guys. We need to go here. Start this. Yeah, I guess everybody now knows who I am. And let's start with giving a definition, because sometimes I notice that people they have sort of an idea, but they don't really get it. So an RRG shows you trends in relative strength, or performance if you want, of multiple securities in a universe against a common benchmark and against each other. That's very, very important. It's not just a one-on-one, it's against everything. Now, you got to be careful, because they do not show performance as such. It shows you trends in performance, trends in relative strength. That's very crucial. And why that is, we'll see that later. And this is an RRG, how it looks. We'll talk about it a little bit more down the line, but for those of you who have not seen it, although I believe you use RRG a lot, so most people will be familiar with this image of the 4 quadrants and the tails and the, in this case, it's US sectors. What we just talked about is the fact that I call that a single security graph, where you only see the chart of one security. And it's a very useful tool, but it will only tell you whether you should invest or not invest in that one single security. But when you need to make a choice between 2 securities, you need another tool. And in the technician's toolbox, there is one single technique, only one, that helps you to make choices and distinguish between 2 securities. And that is relative strength. And as I just explained, that's not the RSI, it's comparative relative strength, where you compare one security with another. And this is how it looks. And I think, Rafi, you had, when you showed your Bloomberg screen with the Brazilian sectors, the orange lines, those were the relative strength lines of the sectors versus the Ibovespa.
Yes, correct.
That is exactly what we have here. So here is the US technology sector with the relative strength versus the S&P 500. And what's important to note is the fact that there are actually trends at play. You see, you know, a big move up, then it moves sideways, moves down a little bit, moves up, moves sideways. And the good news is that we can use everything in our toolbox that we can use on a price chart. We can also use on a relative strength chart. And I call this raw relative strength. And the reason for that is that the numerical value that you see here is useless. That says nothing. I mean, the screen that you had 6 charts of the sectors versus the Ibovespa, but it would not make sense to basically rank those sectors based on this number, because that is completely dependent on the price where the sector trades and the benchmark. It says nothing about the direction, and that is what we want to know. We want to know whether that line is going up or down. Yes. And it's very well possible that a sector like technology, which trades around 1400, shows a relative strength value of 0.47, and there may be another sector that, I don't know, trades at 2000 and has a relative strength value of 0.7, but is moving straight down. So the 0.7 on a line that's going down is less interesting than 0.4 on a line that's going up. So that's the thing that you need to figure out when you start doing ranking based on relative strength, because these numbers are not comparable inside a universe. And if you want to paint a picture of a universe, it's very important that you've got apples and apples and oranges, otherwise it'll make no sense at all. So this is only a one-on-one comparison. Very valuable. It'll help me to make a decision whether I like the technology sector versus the S&P or not. But that's it. It doesn't tell me anything else about the rest of the market. Now, yeah, this is, you were ahead of me. We talked about this. Okay. So here are the building blocks that we discussed: the RS ratio and the RS momentum line. And you can see that the red line is the most important. If that one is above 100, then roughly that RS line is in an uptrend. If the red line goes below, it's in a downtrend, and vice versa. And the green line helps you to anticipate moves in the red line. When the green line crosses the 100 level, so here, for example, in early 2019, the red line is below 100. The green line crosses above. At the moment the green line crosses above 100, a low has been formed inside in the red line, in the RS ratio line. And the same when it crosses below, a high has been formed. Now the good news about this RS ratio line is that it is comparable across a universe. So high values are good and low values are bad. That's, okay. You know, think back to the time when I needed to explain myself to all these portfolio managers, okay, that wanted to know what are the best 5 names. The high RS ratio values were good, the low RS ratio values were bad. But you can also see that, let's say that this is a high value around 103 for this line. Here it goes up at 103. A couple of weeks later, it's going down, and it's the same 103. And that's where the RS momentum line comes in, because I like this RS ratio at 103 as long as it's going up. Okay. If it's at 103 but coming down, I don't like it as much anymore. It's still good, but not as good as we like to see it. So this is what we now have for those individual securities. And that is the first problem was a single security chart. It only tells me something about that thing.
Julius, sorry to interrupt. Can you come back for the early slide just for a minute?
Sure.
What about the color of the bars? Are they related to the color of the quadrants, or what are the rules about the color of the bars? You
are a smart cookie, my man.
Thank you.
These are related to the quadrants. Okay. These are what we call RRG quadrant bars, and you can see when both lines are above 100, they are green. When the green line, the RS momentum, drops below 100, but RS ratio is still above it, they turn orange. Okay. And let me see another example here. They are orange, and then they drop below 100, they become red. Okay. So they are now both below 100. And then when the green line comes back above 100, while red is still below it, they are blue. Okay. And they represent the quadrants on the RRG that we will see later.
Okay.
So back to, the first problem was with a single security chart, you could only say something about that single security. Then we looked at relative strength, where we could say this one is better than the other. So we could make a comparison between two securities. But that is, you know, with what I call classic relative strength, it only looks at one-on-one comparisons. So if you want to view things in a broader context, think back again to my problem that George only wanted to talk about technology because that was all he was focusing about, and I wanted to talk about chemicals, which, you know, was not on his radar. I needed something to put everything together. And I think that it is very important as an investor to oversee the whole universe, because you know, there's so much going on, and there is so much intermarket stuff going on, and there is so much going on inside the universe. Some are good, some are bad. And I compare that because, you know, I come from a military background, and in the military, one of the things that is super important is what we call situational awareness. Knowing where you are, where are you, where are your troops, and where is your enemy. If you know that, then you know what to do and how to attack a specific situation.
Okay.
And in order to do that, military units have what's called an overwatch unit. And these are usually a couple of reconnaissance people and snipers that find themselves at high ground overlooking what's going on. I come from an Air Force background, and we have these AWACS planes that fly very high with the radar screens. They fly over the battlefield, and they can see where everything is, and they can tell the fighter jets what's going on and where they need to go. And that's how I compare that with RRG. RRG is your big picture of the investment battlefield where everything is moving. And with RRG, we have the big picture in one picture. That's basically what it is. And if you go to comparing sectors, then in this example, you know, the GICS level 1 used to be 10 sectors. It's now 11, but in my example, I work with 10 because that's easier. And if you want to make all those comparisons, because we're still talking about relative strength comparisons, it basically means that you have 100 possibilities. 10 by 10, 100. Now, obviously, when you don't have to look at energy versus energy, or you don't have to look at technology versus technology, because that is one. There's no choice there. So that line can go. And that is the number of elements in the universe. In this case, it was 10. So from 100, we're now down to 90, 90. If I have studied technology versus financials, I don't have to study financials against technology, because that's the inverse.
Yep.
You know, same for utilities versus energy. If I've seen utilities versus energy, I've also seen energy versus utilities. So the bottom half of the number of comparisons can go. However, that still leaves me with 45 individual charts, individual relative strength lines that I need to look at to figure out what is the best and the worst in this universe. And you can actually come up with a combination, and that number actually balloons, because if you go to 10 levels, it's 45, as we've seen, and the next level in GICS is 24 industry groups. That is 24 times 24 is 576. 24 industry groups taken off leaves you with 552. Divided by 2 leaves you with 276 individual charts that you would need to see to get an idea about what's going on in that universe. How many stocks are in the Ibovespa?
75, I think. Yeah.
2,775 charts, my friend. You need to watch. If you want to If you want to figure out inside the Ibovespa with 75 members, which one is the best or the worst and how they are interacting, it means that you would actually have to browse through 2,775 charts. That is impossible. Yeah. That nobody's going to do it. And even if you would like to do that work,
yep,
you will run into a situation where you will say, okay, chart number 45 looks very good, and 327 was very good, and 900, you know, but yep, then, you know, how can I relate all of that? And that became RRG. That is, if you put all of that in one image, you get the big picture that you're looking for as an overwatch, as a visualization of everything that should be on your radar screen. And if we walk over an RRG, then the top right-hand quadrant, which is called leading, that's where you find securities. And I talk a lot about sectors and stocks, but it can be currencies, it can be cryptos, it can be commodities, it can be individual asset classes, basically anything that you can compare with each other, you can throw at an RRG. So in the top right-hand quadrant, you will find securities that are in a relative uptrend versus their benchmark, and the benchmark is the center of the chart, and that trend is still being pushed higher. That has a positive momentum. So if you think back to that chart with the red and the green lines, this is where the red line is still moving up. That's 103 the first time. Then after a while, that momentum starts to roll over and crosses below 100. That is 103 the second time. It's still good, but it's losing momentum. So in the weakening quadrant, bottom right, we will have the securities that are still in a relative uptrend, but they are losing relative strength. They're losing momentum. Now, if that loss of momentum continues, then eventually those securities will end up in the lagging quadrant. And that is where you find securities that are in a relative downtrend versus the benchmark. And that downtrend is still being pushed further down by negative momentum. And just like momentum rolls over first on the upside, it curls up first on the downside. And that's when the security is being pushed inside the improving quadrant, which means that the relative downtrend is still intact, but it's not going down anymore. That negative momentum is leveling off and starting to pick up. And if that improvement of momentum continues, eventually it will rotate into the leading quadrant. And then you will find this rotating clockwise fashion. And I got to tell you, when I noticed this sort of movement on my very early day RRG, it was really a like, wow, like aha, like hey, because everybody was always talking about sector rotation, but nobody was ever able to show me that they were actually rotating in a clockwise fashion. And that's what an RRG does. It shows you how they rotate in and out of favor versus the benchmark, but very important, also versus each other. And that's what makes it so powerful, because this single image will give you the relationship of all the elements in your universe, whether that's sectors, whether that's stocks, currencies, etc. It doesn't matter.
That's why, Julius, I've been saying to all my clients and followers that this is the future of the technical analysis, because technical analysis are improving when you are doing intermarket analysis, when you are doing some sector rotation. And the RRG came up with this rotation that this is perfect because you can see
how the stocks or the sector are related to the benchmark, but you can see the intermarkets, how the intermarkets going, not only on the theory, but especially on the charts. So that's why this is amazing. That's why I'm saying that this is the future, not because future. But this is something that all technicians should use to know what should you do. All technicians and all portfolio managers as well, because from the portfolio manager perspective, you should know what do you have to do with your money to get alpha, to get
exactly, yeah. So right now we look at the chart of the sectors in the Ibovespa, and I think so now it becomes a little bit more readable.
Yeah.
And I will. This is probably nicely visible on the screen right now if you're watching on a smaller screen. So here is the RRG, and this is a static one. But the very nice thing about, and this is the implementation in Optima, you can actually, and I'll scroll it back, and now I just browse forward with my arrow keys. I can just toggle. And you can see how these sectors move against each other and against the benchmark. And you can see the rotational character of these tails. And that gives you in one image, you can see how these sectors move among each other. Let's speed it up a little bit. And we got to the end, and this is where we are. So this is up to Friday's close, and mind you, I don't. Well, I do look at the Brazilian market, but not really in depth. But this chart immediately tells me that I should look at financials and I should look at real estate. And I should be very careful with electrical, with industrials, and be on the lookout with consumption and materials. Utilities is interesting because you know, if you look at that rotation, we scroll back, utilities did very well, like we're here, and then they rolled over, they lost momentum. And now they are starting to curl back up. So I'd be very interested to track utilities now and see if they can make it back to the leading quadrant without hitting the lagging quadrant. Because we know that that is a very interesting situation, because basically what that tells me is that a rotation that completes completely on the right-hand side or completely on the left-hand side is usually a very strong relative trend. Now, we've seen the fact that all these tails are rotating, and theoretically, and in the model, if you want, they rotate clockwise through all quadrants. But with every economic model or visualization model, there is a difference between theory and practice.
Okay.
And what we see in practice is that when we have very strong trends, you can have a situation where you go from leading to weakening, back to leading, back to weakening. And then you have to, let me quickly go back to that chart where you rightfully noticed the colors of the bars. This one here. You see? Red remains above and green oscillates around 100. That is what you see here. Then you see it rotating on the right-hand side because it's a very strong trend. And if you see at technology at that time, it was a very strong trend which lasted for more than a year. So that is how you can see that. There are many more things that we can We can talk about, you know, there's if you just simply look at this chart, you see that this real estate sector has a very long tail. But what's this? Consumption has a very short tail. We can talk about that. We can talk about the difference in length between the observations. We can talk about the direction of the tail. There are many things that you can learn from an RRG that is impossible to see on a normal chart. You know, all that stuff, there are so many things that discriminate on an RRG, which are simply not visible on a regular chart.
So let's talk about the individual charts. Now that we know how RRG works, my question is, how do you mix individual charts with RRG? Do you expect some breakouts, for instance, or level, some breakouts to confirm what you are seeing on RRG, or the opposite side? So you see something on the, for instance, leading quadrant to confirm at the individual charts?
Yes, for me, I get a lot of questions like, what is the track record for RRG? What are the trading rules for RRG? It was never designed as a trading system. It was designed as a visualization tool to get that big picture. Over the past few years, we've done a lot of work and do some quantification, and we can now come up with some rules. But let's stick with the basics here for now, and use it as a visualization tool. Okay. And I will always tell people that RRG should be used in combination with something else. It's a piece of the puzzle, and it will help you to guide you to where you need to focus, where the interesting trading opportunities may be. So if I look at an RRG, what I would do is I start at an RRG. Let's for example, take this one for the Brazilian sectors. I would bring up the chart of the financials index, for example. Click on that, and then look at how this chart behaves. And I use the RRG lines, but you know, I've been a professional analyst for many years, just like you. I'm not sure about how you respond to that, but I've had so many people at my desk coming to tell me, like, okay, I've invented this super duper trading system, rule set, whatever, forget everything else. This is the only thing you need, and you will make a ton of money. The world doesn't work like that. And if you're a professional analyst, you have come to a tool set that you like to work with. You have a certain routine, a certain workflow. And I'm not going to tell someone what they should do. You know, we're all professionals. We're all doing our own business. So what I want to do is I want to give you a tool that helps make your life a little bit easier and pinpoint to interesting regions of the market and give you a big picture overview. So RRG, in my view, should always be embedded in a workflow. And if you're an Elliott wave analyst, please go make your counts and come up with your scenario. If you are a chart pattern recognition person, go to your chart, try to find the patterns and the formations that you want to look for. If you are looking for overbought, oversold, use your, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but the RRG will tell you which chart you need to check with your workflow. So, you know, for the financial index, you know, I can do a very quick analysis here, and I see that, you know, we've had this bottoming formation. Could have been a triangle. This is a weekly chart that we're looking at. So this could be a reversing symmetrical triangle with a breakout. We have a little bit of hesitation here. Again, we broke out. So I can make up my scenario and think like, hey, this looks pretty good. I think it goes higher. I mean, that's the way I would do it.
Okay.
Be careful with industrials. Why? Well, let me look at this. Here you see the industrials, they went up very fast, and this is where the strength of relative strength comes in. You see that this, you know, we saw financials, and we now see industrials. Both of these charts are in a sort of an uptrend since their March lows. But the RRG lines and relative strength tells me that financials are rising much faster than industrials. So if you are a fund manager or a portfolio manager or simply an investor that wants to beat the Ibovespa, you need to be invested in financials and not in industrials, because if you're in industrials, you're lagging the market. And that's what you can read from that RRG.
So I have a question here from audience, from Ralph Martins. He asked, Julius, is it possible to use RRG with the penny stocks?
With penny stocks?
Yes.
Yes, it is possible, but I want to make the caveat or warning. I mean, you can use RRG with anything that is comparable. And the best example that I can give you is if you want to use, for example, RRG with asset classes, and you want to make a decision between bonds and stocks, you need to use a bond index, because if you use yields, you know, that will flip everything upside down, and it's not comparable. So yields and stocks are not comparable. Now, obviously, penny stocks are very well comparable. The only problem with penny stocks is that they are usually not very liquid, and they have very big price jumps. So what I always tell people is that when you are analyzing illiquid markets, you want to create liquidity by compressing your chart. So small caps and penny stocks, for that matter, I would be reluctant to look at I would be reluctant to look at a daily chart, just a normal daily chart. So for that reason, I'm also reluctant to look at penny stocks on a daily RRG. But we can, and we've worked with a weekly. Let me create a daily RRG so you can see the difference. So here, this is the daily version of these sectors, and now we look at the weekly, and we could even do it on an intraday basis or monthly or whatever. But for penny stocks and illiquid stuff, I would advise people to go to a weekly, because you look at longer term trends. Because basically what we do as technical analysts, when we look at charts and we look at trends, we look at the behavior of a crowd of people. And in large cap stocks that are traded heavily every day, there is a big crowd, and we can apply our crowd behavior tools as in trends. When you look at the chart of a small cap or a penny stock, the crowd that you are studying is much smaller. So the odds that group of people, that crowd will change their mind is much bigger than that the crowd that is trading, you know, Apple and Microsoft will change their mind. So to increase the crowd size, I go to weekly charts. Because on a weekly basis, there are many more people who trade those penny stocks and those small cap stocks. So I call it creating liquidity by compressing the charts from daily to weekly. And maybe you want to even go to monthly, but then the trends become really, really long.
Yep.
So the answer, it's a bit of a long answer, but the answer is yes. But you got to be aware of the underlying problems that you may run into. But the chart, the RRG, will run just fine. It will show you the rotations, not a problem.
Okay.
So I have this question here from Alexandre Chamas. Julius, if you were to choose a stock between these two, one, the situation one, the stock was on leading and turning to the weakening quadrant,
yeah,
and the situation two, the other was improving, and now is close to the entering to the leading quadrant. Which one? I know it's relative, but
so okay, so we have one stock that is inside leading but moving towards weakening.
Yes.
And the other one is inside improving and moving towards leading.
Yes.
Okay, then you want to go with the one that is in improving and going into leading. And the reason, I'll tell you why. The stock that moved through leading and is now going into weakening has already made a more or less a relative trend. It had made a trend, and it's now at least coming to a pause in that trend. Not necessarily ending it, but it's losing momentum, so that trend is now stalling. Where the one that's going from improving into leading still has momentum as being pushed higher and still has a way to go. So from an investor point of view, you want to pick up at as early as possible those trails when they start moving. So for this question, it's very specific question, nice question by the way. I prefer the one that is still in early stages because you have more profit opportunity and less risk, because this one here, it's just like a normal trend. If you're in that trend, then there is also the risk is increasing. As soon as you get in there, as soon as the trend starts to move, the risk is increasing. Whereas if you're at the early stage, you have a lot of potential profit and a little bit of risk.
Okay, and let's talk about the Ibovespa, because I think that we have a good situation for Ibovespa because we are gaining momentum versus the other ETFs. So I think that this is a time, or maybe it's a time to decup for the other markets. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've loaded up. This is the implementation at stockcharts.com for RRG, and this chart here shows you an RRG for a number of international stock markets. They are listed here. And you see that the Ibovespa, I'll highlight it, is right here in this universe. And this is, we just spoke about it. It's inside improving and heading towards leading. And if you look at the whole universe, you can actually see that the Ibovespa is the market with the highest momentum at the moment. So it's compared to the rest of the universe. The benchmark here is the Dow Jones Global Index. The Ibovespa is doing really, really well. It's still at a positive angle towards leading. So it's compared to the rest of these stock markets, Ibovespa is a very interesting tail at the moment. It also has a very long tail, which means that there is power behind the move. And if you compare it, for example, with the S&P 500, which is inside weakening and moving the other way. So right now, if I would have to choose between Ibovespa and S&P 500, I would choose for Ibovespa. And where are you going to do that? Because if we play this out, then you can see, that they move somewhat in opposite directions. And that is how you can make a choice and try to benefit from one market doing better than another one.
Well, that makes me think that RRG can be used to do some long shorts or pair trades.
Absolutely.
Because we can choose the one who is improving momentum and for long to go long, and the other one who is weakening to go short. So I've been doing this, and I gotta tell you, Julius, my results here are amazing. Though the people can tell it on chat, because everything, and especially because it's not necessary to make some long shorts with the stock for the same sector. You can choose for the stock, you can choose and pick stocks from the different sectors. So that's makes so much special. And I've been doing here in 11 Financial, and I gotta tell you, this is great. This has improved my results much better using RRG.
Yeah, we can if we if just for fun look at the this is the RRG for the Ibovespa stocks, and we can very quickly come up with some trading ideas. So just two that I immediately see is a potential long position for Embraer and a short for maybe Magazine Luiza or BZW. By the way, this is very aggressive.
Okay.
Because this is still in a downtrend and this is still in an uptrend, but so what I'm looking for is tails that go in opposite directions. If you look at this, that's very aggressive. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, then, for example, a short in Suzano and a long in
Cirela.
Yes. Or
Cogna. Yes.
So that's like, I can very rapidly pick up potential pairs, and then obviously the next step would be to draw the individual charts, compare them to each other, run them through your workflow. Where is support resistance? What is my P&L ratio? What is my potential loss? So, but this is the starting point, and because of the visualization, I can very rapidly come up with potential pair trading ideas, put them in my workflow, and either execute the trade or wait a little bit longer, etc. But I can immediately see it. And then what a lot of people do, because this is actually used by a lot of hedge funds, this technique. What they also do is create a list of the holdings in their portfolio and run that portfolio on an RRG. So keep the positions on an RRG and monitor the movement of those positions on an RRG to see whether they're still doing what they should do, or whether they need to get into action and reverse or buy or sell something else.
Okay, so Julius, we are running out of the time here. I just have a final question here from the audience, and this question came to me all the time here. Where can we find RRG? Where can we find your work, and how can we analyze Brazilian stock using RRG?
Yeah, well, good question, legitimate question. RRGs are now available on Bloomberg Professional and Refinitiv Icon terminals. Those are professional systems, which means that they are higher priced. What we've been using today, most of the time, is the Optima software. That's optima.com. They also provide, it can run on top of a Bloomberg terminal. The charts that I've been using have been using Bloomberg data, but they can also, they also have data for the Brazilian stock market without a Bloomberg terminal. So Optima is the go-to for the Brazilian market at the moment. Then there is an implementation that we also saw at stockcharts.com, but that only covers the US market and India and the UK, if you're interested in that, but it's primarily US. and we have an implementation at the Hong Kong Economic Journal. So for those of you who speak Chinese and trade the Hong Kong market, by all means, go to the Hong Kong Economic Journal. And we have on relativerotationgraphs.com, we have a little utility that people can use when they have their own data. So when people have data on their local machine, they can use our what we call desktop application. It's a very simple application that can visualize data that you have on your machine. But when you're in Brazil, and I guess that, what is that? Oh, wow, over 2,000 people are probably all Brazilians, maybe a few European, Portuguese people that are watching you, but I guess the majority will Brazilian. Guys, go to RAFI, look at his work, and I can tell you that RAFI and I are working to get a dedicated RRG product for the Brazilian market. And I'm 100% sure that when it's ready, he will be the guy to actually tell you and show it to you and let you know where you can find it.
Definitely, definitely. So Julius, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for all these explanation. I would like to let you for the final message, especially for the audience, because here in Brazil, all the individual investors are booming just because of our interest rates are going down. So we have the lowest interest rate on record. So and of course they want to make money, and individuals are booming at the market. So what is your message? What do you have to say about for these individuals? And again, thank you very much. I hope that we can see that we can bring much more ideas from the RRG, especially here in Brazil, from your presence here on maybe, I think it's April. I don't know the date, but probably the year, probably your presence here will be much better. And for those who are watching us, you should know that Julius will be with us in our course fusion method of fusion. So if you want to know more about the RRG and all these steps, so you should hit the link on a describe of this video on a YouTube video. So Julius, I will let you for the final message for all the Brazilians, and I hope to see you again here in Brazil on April. And again, I'm so excited. So this is for me, it's like a dream came true. So thank you very much. I will let you for the final message.
Obrigado, Rafi. Thank you very much for having me. And it was absolutely my pleasure. And everybody, thank you for attending. My details are on the screen. I am pretty accessible. Either talk to Rafi or to me directly. But Rafi is my friend in Brazil, and we will work on a good implementation of RRG for the Brazilian market, because it's worth it.
Okay. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you tomorrow on the morning call at 9:35 or at 8:35, and of course next Sunday for next Domingo com Rafi. Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.